How cool is that?
Yeah.
Composer Jay Woelfel. First one that comes up. First of all, thank you for coming. This was a real treat. Yeah, this was a real treat. When you first looked at this picture, sort of from 10,000 feet, I guess, was there anything that you thought that stood out to you that said this needs special treatment?
Oh, you mean when I was actually scoring it?
Yes.
I don't know where I mean, the opening notes and the closing notes are what first came into my head. I started doing this just on my own without telling anybody, and so in case it just didn't work, nobody ever needed to know. The Loda music is very kind of, cat-like with the kind of trilling flutes and things like that, kind of like a cat purrs. And then some things like when the Myling, the dog boy servant, when he gets beat up by the captain, and then tries to grab him, and the captain wakes up, and then they drag him away. I was like, I really need something for the sort of beaten beast man theme. So I just wrote a couple notes, because the scene's almost over, but he walked off, I was like, well, he needs something. He needs a little exit, And then right after I did that, I was like, well, this is the What Is the Law music. This is the beast man, theme for the whole rest of the movie. And I just wrote out that rest of that music right then and there. So originally I thought the whole, What Is the Law theme, I'd do some big call and answer or drums or something like that. But so that was one of those things that as you're doing it, you find something. And then later on, when Oorang was climbing up the logs to get the girl, I came up with this little thing, and I was like, well, that's his theme. So then I had to go back, and I put his little theme in a couple places where he shows up earlier. But that's kind of how it got built. The main theme, James Bernard, who scored a lot of Hammer films, I don't know if you know him, one of his things, and other composers do this too, they take the title of the picture and they say it. So that opening thing is really the island of Dr. Moreau, There's no other lyrics to it, although there are actually, I wrote a whole other thing for that. But so but that was the only, up front I was like, well, it should say the island of Dr. Moreau somehow, even though it's called the Island of Lost Souls. So I originally sat down and did about a 6-minute piece. I knew what the opening and the closing of it would be, and then I worked in that theme, and then I started cutting that to picture. And then after that, then I just started scoring, one scene at a time.
Well, tell me.
Oh, yeah. Into the light, go into
Here we go. Yeah. Talk about the balance, I guess, or was there a challenge for the balance between a contemporary sounding score and a period correct sounding? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen people do live scores. There was a guy who did a live score to the Spanish Dracula with 2 electric guitars. It was actually quite effective, but a lot of people do these kind of things, and it's almost kind of like a stunt. And I didn't really want to do that, which is why I couldn't perform this live. I mean, this was a couple months worth of work and like just multi-track after multi-track. But I wasn't trying to score it as an old movie. I was just scoring it as a movie. So there's some period music where Monroe's having the 2 dinner parties, which you probably almost don't even really hear that. And that music's all like filtered and cramped down. It's a little like, it's dinner party music, like Monroe's playing his gramophone or whatever you want to call it. But then there's also times where like the beast man's screaming on the table, which for me is really hard to watch, where he's holding that guy's head and turning it, where it has this almost kind of, Planet of the Apes thing or something. There was a general sort of tone, I guess, to this where I was more kind of going for Bernard Herrmann or Elmer Bernstein or some of that era of guys as an influence. There's a couple real subtle quotes from them in there. There's a little Jerry Goldsmith motif one place too. I don't usually do that kind of thing, but doing music for this movie was kind of like a homage to the movie itself. Right. I mean? Like this is what I hear in my head when I watch this movie without music. So it doesn't need music, but it seemed like it gained something by having it.
What was the original version like? What was the experience of that? Was that they borrowed pieces from here and there, or?
There's opening, basically the way I scored this, I basically avoided the parts of the movie which had been scored. They had tracked music for the opening credits and the end credits. There was no music for the entire rest of the movie. None. Absolutely none. The opening music's actually kind of catchy. The end music is sort of ridiculously happy, sort of like a 20s dance or something, because obviously the end of the movie is not the happiest thing ever. I mean, they do escape, but so that was just completely like so inappropriate. It's like, but I just watched the Three Stooges, or I'm a Dr. Moreau.
And who knows where they got it from?
Yeah, it was not even written for the movie. So
Right,
even
right.
then, those two pieces were just dropped in. I don't know why. Max Steiner and Franz Waxman, Bride of Frankenstein and King Kong, those really sort of set the tone for like movies having music. Neither of those guys worked at Paramount at the time. Maybe if they had, they would have written, something as great as those two scores for this movie. But I really don't know. The approach to the movie is not real static and staid and kind of stagey or anything like that. The director supposedly dressed up like Moreau during the film. He wore like the whole white thing with the whip and the whole deal, Earl Kenton. So he was really into the movie. Wells didn't like the movie because he thought it turned his ideas into a horror film. Wells didn't like any movies made from his material, as it turned out. I think in the book you could kind of imagine these horrors and that was okay, but when you see them like swarming over people and all this stuff, that was too much for him. And the Panther Woman has a very small part in the book. That's really a creation of the screenwriters, which is Philip Wiley, who wrote When Worlds Collide, and also wrote an early Spielberg thing, which is a very good ballet, 2017. And the other writer wrote a version of Cleopatra, Waldemar Young. They were both raised in very religious families. Young was Mormon, and so there's Moreau creates his own morality, and then he creates his own laws, and then he breaks them for his own purposes. So there's a kind of morality to the thing. This and Frankenstein are movies about men who want to become a mother. They're trying to raise, it's kind of about men trying to be women, really. And it's interesting that the woman's the hero. She comes and saves him. The guy is just stuck there, and that again is not in the book. So it sort of shows you how badly men screw it all up. And in the remakes, you guys have probably seen her, they turn it into genetics. There's the one scene in here where Moreau's talking about making plants, which is basically kind of genetic stuff. He's like, but the rest of it's vivisecting, which is cutting up something that's living as opposed to dissecting. And because of Jack the Ripper, weirdly enough, in London, there was a scandal like Moreau describes with this guy who was vivisecting animals and was run out of town on a rail and all this kind of stuff. H.G. Wells was big into eugenics, which then became kind of the horror of the Holocaust, although he hated Hitler and everything he embraced, but there was this whole idea of purifying the race without really thinking about that being a bad thing. Why shouldn't men be better? Why shouldn't science make mankind better? So in the remakes, it all becomes DNA. So they're just injecting them and people are screaming, but that's not really to be like as effective as just literally carving a human out of some poor animal. Yeah, it loses something. I think this is,
You were talking about, I guess, the process and how quickly it was certainly there's technology that we have now that wasn't available back then, but was there technology that you chose to not use for any particular reason, or how did you approach, your...
The actual, although the original movie has no jungle sounds either. There's no jungle sounds. Sometimes there's punches and things and there's just no sounds anywhere. So we put a lot of that in. All of that we laid in either from other old movies of the period, or we took these stereo effects and turned them into mono, so that all of the sort of sound effects are in mono. The jungle ambience and the music is stereo, so that kind of creates this kind of 3-channel kind of effect. And like I said, a lot of this stuff, Charles Laughton was a method actor before they really called them that. So Hitchcock said the 3 most difficult things to film were babies, boats, and Charlie Laughton. Because Charles Laughton never liked any of the stuff he did the first several days of a movie. On the thing that Hitchcock first did with him, he wanted to develop a walk for the characters. He goes, you may not shoot me walking into any scenes until I get this walk. And it was like 3 or 4 days of shooting, and finally he came to Hitchcock and showed him this walk, which is great in the movie. But Hitchcock was just appalled because he's not a serious film actor. In film, he can't be, you needed to have him walk on schedule, and he wouldn't. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, he kind of did one of these refusing to come out of his trailer for 3 days until he felt he could pull off the scene where he's whipped. So the other thing is Charles Laughton, as you may or may not know, was bisexual. He was married, but in England it was illegal to be homosexual. You go to jail until almost 1960, which is kind of shocking. So he came to the United States, and one day after 14 hours of shooting, Earl Kenton, the director, came up to him and said, Charlie, I don't know how you tell you this, but that last one was kind of fey. And Charles Laughton said, well, after 14 hours, some of it's bound to show. For me, I think it's that scene where he lays down on that gurney. He does that weird kind of... So I think that helps his kind of metrosexuality, to Moreau, and the whole idea of him, having people have sex with animals and all this stuff. This is all before the production code was enforced, so a lot of those things got cut out over the years. This is the full-length version of the movie, but it's not real violent. I mean, there's not on-screen violence, but the whole sexual ideas are just way, way beyond the pale. The other interesting thing to me is all the Beastmen are played by people who don't speak English as a natural language. Would go see the wrestlers. Even Loda, she was a model, but she was not an actor. And that's, I think, just like smart casting. She's all about body language and stuff. Anyway.
Well, it was really special, and we really appreciate you coming in for this.
Oh, thanks.
And thanks a lot.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.